Okay, so we were talking about the Afro Young anthology, and you had a lot to say about that. And I'd just like to know,
Absolutely.
how has the anthology been performing since our last conversation?
It has actually, I mean, COVID obviously has set us back, but it has absolutely been amazing. We're supposed to do a launch in Nairobi before, and it happened like, we're supposed to do it like 2 weeks before like 2 weeks after the lockdown, but they shut us down quicker before we're able to do it. And where we're planning to do it is, we had like some young kids from a less economically good area, and they were going to do a performance. We translated in, I wrote a play and got the two Swahili writers to translate that play, and I merged their two stories. So that's what was going to happen. And there was, of course, the launch in Johannesburg just before lockdown again. That was in February. And I know that copies, despite the fact that Congo was not one of the countries that was that did the workshops or that took part, there were, the books have been distributed to about 20 countries on the continent. So I think that's absolutely positive.
Wonderful, wonderful. And you have been very, very busy. You won the Gotha Medal, which is
very excited about that.
Yeah, normally conferred on individuals who have made outstanding contribution to international cultural exchange, which we all know that you certainly have. But what are your reactions to winning that medal?
Well, of course, I was very honored to be selected for that. And I'm not with people. I mean, Vera is amazing. She's doing amazing work in Bolivia, and Ian McEwen, doesn't need an introduction. So it was an immense honor. But as I keep saying in interviews, as I keep saying since I got this, as great the honor as it is, it kind of like, just a bit, that the honor did not start from the continent. I would have preferred it if it were from here even more, but it doesn't mean that I appreciate it any less, but it would have meant more.
So talking about things starting from the continent, you've been in you've had a lot of press recently. The New York Times, the some South African publications. Just yesterday, I was reading your interview in Doek. Is that how you say it? Doek Lit Mag. Is that how you pronounce it?
It's Duke. Duke. It's Afrikaans. So I don't expect you to get it right.
Well, I'm embarrassed. Duke. Okay, so, and I've seen that you've given, in retweeting things, you've given a lot of prominence to those publications originating from the continent. Was that deliberate?
Yes, absolutely, it's deliberate. I think it's very important to acknowledge when our people acknowledge us. So yeah, it was definitely deliberate.
Okay, and you've been busy with Afro Lit Song Frontiers, the online festival.
That has been a lot of fun.
In fact, you have the distinction of being the first person to start this initiative in response to the coronavirus. You talk about that.
Yes, and of course, I mean, like, of course, and the day after we finished it, there were some people from the colonials who wanted to claim that they were the first. It was very interesting to me watching how the continent just did a pushback up until they did that non-apology of theirs. So that was funny. But yeah, the Afro Lit Sans Frontiers has been absolutely amazing. It has been the continent has been very generous in opening up, and the continental writers, there are always all these things about how African writers don't do this, African writers don't do this. But I think it's probably one of those situations that has shown, hey, you know what? When African writers are called to, they come to the table. Because unfortunately, because it's something that I just conceived out of home, and I don't have any sponsorship, nobody is getting paid for it, but still, consistently I ask people and people agree to do it, and that means a lot.
And you announced this at a time when most people were still in a daze over the lockdown, quarantine, and all of these things. And most people still didn't even know what to do with themselves. And you came up with this idea. How?
Thank you. No, it actually came out from a conversation that I was having, because I'd been watching something on television, on Instagram rather. I was watching John Legend's At Home, and I was thinking to myself, well, why can't we do this with literature? And I thought, everybody's at home right now. We've got a captive audience, and a lot of people. I don't know how many times, I know that has happened to you, because it certainly happens to me a lot of times, where people say to me, yeah, Zukiswa, can you give us recommendations of books, of things to read? And I thought to myself, hey, I can have a literary festival where I do those recommendations by inviting all the writers that you probably don't know, but I feel you should know. Sometimes a few of them you know, but most of the time you don't know them, and I think even people who are well-read like yourselves, I'm sure during the festival you've discovered some writers and some literatures that you didn't know. And I think that's what's exciting about it.
That's what I was going to ask you next, that as immersed as I am, or as I like to think that I am in the literary environment, not just in Nigeria, but the continent and even beyond, there have been people featured in this festival who I wasn't aware of before, and whose works I now follow. There's that. And then there's also the fact that I noticed this concerted effort to feature literally every corner of Africa in every language you can imagine, Lusophone, Francophone. So and without being led by who has an international publishing deal. It seems like an ideological choice that you've made. Can you talk about that?
Yes, absolutely. You and I talked about it when I did the Afro Young Adults, which was like something that was very important to me even when I did that then, which is essentially, I would like us to be speaking, I always said in getting my work translated, if my work is translated into French or it's translated in Portuguese, I'm more interested in getting that work to speak to the people in Mozambique and the people in Cote d'Ivoire and the people in Senegal than I am in the people in France or the people in Portugal. I mean, if they dig it, then it's cool, but ultimately, I want to talk more to the continent, because I know they understand what I'm talking about. I'm not doing certain things that that I'm trying to please a certain audience. I'm having a conversation with my continent, and if anybody else outside gets it, then fantastic, great. But if they don't, I'm sorry, not sorry.
So our first reference is ourselves. So Pivapo, your publishing outfit, can you talk about that and why you set that up?
Yes, absolutely. I set it up essentially to do the sort of things, to fill the sort of gaps that I felt were lacking in South and in East Africa, in Southern Africa and in East Africa. And, you know, I mean, obviously, I am more keen to be doing partnerships with West Africa instead of, if I can get in that market, then cool. But ideally, I want us to be able to do like an exchange with West African publishers. So what I had in mind, and it continues to the hearts, to the roots of what I'm interested in, what I've done with La Shamba, what I've done with Afro Young Adult, what I'm doing now with Afro Lit Sans Frontiers, is essentially, so the first book that I published is a children's book that I think you're familiar with because it's published by Weta Books, Story, Story, Story Come.
I know.
And what I have done for Southern and East Africa is worked at getting it translated into as many major Southern and East African languages as possible. And the reason for that is I don't want only privileged children who speak English to be able to get access to the stories. I think they're important to everybody. So I would ideally like, so far I've got there's a Shona translation, there's Xhosa translation, there's a Tshivenda translation. We've got a Kiswahili translation in progress. And I've put it out to the universe and also applied for funding to see whether I can get some funds so that I can do a French and Portuguese translation, so that I'll be able then to do Kimbundu and Lingala translation. You know, so I'm interested in seeing how many languages we can in Southern and East Africa, Southern, Central, and East Africa take care of, because it's a population of about 400 million. You know, and most of those people are children. So I think we need to make sure that at least they're taken care of. You know, as much as we talk about food security, we should also have food of the brain security.
Yes. And you published Nkoma Wanguge's With the Scarred. Can you talk about that?
Yes, I published With the Scarred. You see, I saw With the Scarred. It was called Mrs. Shaw originally. It was published in 2015 by Ohio University Press. And when it was that book by Nkoma that stayed for a very long time and read in my house, because why do I want to read about Mrs. Shaw? You know? I'm like, who cares? But anyway, so this one time that I was actually like totally without anything to read, and I was just like, okay, let me see what Nkoma is saying. You know, he's my friend after all. So I picked up Mrs. Shaw and I read it, and I was like, oh my God, this is the book, the best book that is written as far as I'm concerned, you know, of the books that he's done. Obviously, maybe he'll come up with something much greater in future. So I was like, this is absolutely amazing. And I loved it and I enjoyed it. And then I was like, so I called him and I was like, dude, initially, I wanted copies from Ohio University Press because I just wanted to do a performance for Artistic Encounters. I wanted the book performed for Artistic Encounters, which is something that I was curating for a very long time, for the last 3 years. And so he said to me, yeah, to Ohio. And I got in touch with Ohio and I said to them, listen, I really, really, really want copies of this book. Where do I get it? And they're like, oh, it's sold out. And I'm like, are you planning on reprinting? And they're like, no. And then they're like, do you want the rights? And I was like, yeah, you know? So I was like, cool. You know? So I hadn't planned to get the rights, but when they told me that, when they asked me whether I wanted the rights, I was like, yes, this book needs to be in circulation. So then they gave me the rights. And then, of course, I had, I mistakenly sent you the wrong PDF initially when you were reading through for one read. And then I sent the correct one because I had to do an edit. I had to, this Americanism to the English that we speak on the continent. You know what I mean? So I had to edit that, and I enjoyed it immensely. I enjoyed working with you know, remembering what email addresses used to be there at the time of the writing, at the time where the book is set, which is like 2000 or whatever. So it was a lot of fun for me. And Mkoma really just gave me a thing. He was just like, do what you want. He was such a fun writer to work with, you know, because he wasn't held up and stuff and everything. And then what we then did was, after I finished, then I said to him, in fact, before I'd even finished editing, I said to him, listen, my guy, this Mr. Shaw thing, it's not gonna fly. And he said to me, okay. And then he was like, and I said, let's think about title suggestions. And he's like, oh, I had written it as the book of what? I'm like, no, the book of what? No. And we went through, and I was like, and then the one thing that hit me, you know, and I got this while I was swimming, which is the kind of thing why I'm sad that we can't swim anymore because of Corona. So I was swimming and I was thinking to myself, the one thing that Kalumba has, you know, the one thing that every writer, every reader remembers is how the first time that you see him later on is how he's got all these scars on his body. It's such a thing. And it was like his physical scars. But I started thinking also about, you know, how everybody in that story is scarred. But I also started thinking about myself as a reader, because he sets it in in a random African country. You know, it's a fictional African country, but it's very much the story of each and every one of us. It's the story of each and every one of our countries. Constantly, our politicians make us hope, and constantly we get disappointed. So there's this moment of hope, and we think, oh, we're there, it's gonna happen now, and then, you know, and that's what essentially happens. And then, you know, so I'm like, Mkoma, how about with a scarred? And Mkoma was like, hey, how about with a scarred? And that was it, really, you know?
Well done.
Yeah.
So you've just talked about your manuscript. So what can we expect from you next?
Right. I've got, well, firstly, I did a book for younger children, I guess 9 to 12, and it's a reimagining of Nelson Mandela during his Black Pimpernel days. So it's an adventure series, and there were 8 writers that were invited throughout the world to do this reimagination, and I was lucky to be one of them, you know, and it's going to be published by Pushkin Press. Expected date of publication is going to be, I was just talking to my editor, and he was saying it's May 2021, you know, but I've already submitted the last thing, and they've already put out the first 2 in the series. So I'm hoping maybe by May 2021, when it comes out, we won't have Corona, so I'll be able to come to Nigeria and go to South Africa and go to Zim, go to all over the continent, go to Congo, go to Angola, and be able to like read it to kids, you know. And yeah, so anyway, yeah, that's essentially it, really.
Well done. I mean, you've just talked about a literary project now about Mandela. We are having this conversation today when news has just broken about the passing of Zinzi Mandela.
Yes, indeed. It's really heartbreaking because she you know, she passed on today. And in this book, when this man is captured, you know, he went underground. This particular section of the book, he went underground when she was immediately after the treason trial. So when she was like 3 months old, and then he was underground. So of course, I mean, there were times that Winnie would visit and stuff. with children, but she was still too very young. And when he actually got imprisoned, when he got arrested in 1962, which led to the Rivonia trial and his life sentence, which ended up being 27 years, she was she wasn't even 2 years old. She was a few months to two, you know. And so she never saw this man who was her father except from pictures and from hearing stories about him. And yet one of the things that all of us remember the most, all of us who are South African remember the most, is 1985, when she read the speech that he wrote, you know, as a response to P.W. Botha, who was saying he wanted to negotiate with him and he could set him free, and famously known as "My Father Said" speech, you know. And so that's one of the things, obviously, that one remembers. But closer to home to me is in 2010, in 2009 actually. The book came out in 2010. In 2009, I did a collaboration of a coffee table book with the late Alf Kumalo, who was one of the greatest photographers in South Africa. And you know, so it was his photographs, and because I was familiar with his photographs, I did essays in the book, and it's called 8115, A Prisoner's Home. And she was my script consultant in so far as letting me know, because there were certain things that Alf wasn't too clear with. And so I got in touch with her and I'd say, okay, who's in this photo and when was this exactly? So that I would know which section of the book it would go into. And she was extremely generous and she was extremely kind. And she had a wicked sense of humor. And I would ask her and she'd tell me, and you know, and what happened after that is there was a dinner for Alf Kumalo's 50 years, and she came with her mom, Mama Winnie Mandela, and she came, and there were, you know, there were like just like a lot of fun. Like Winnie was late, right? So she made an appearance as obviously only she could, you know. But it was like one of those things where everybody was like, oh my God, Winnie's late, Winnie's late, Winnie's late. Is Winnie coming? And Alf was like, no, Winnie's coming. And then when she finally came, it was just like one of those things where she came, and even if you'd been annoyed that she was late, she charmed all of us so much. She made us laugh. And Zinzi was there and she was amazing and she made us laugh. And later on, I did keep in touch with her. So I would email sporadically. And that particular project, I'll tell you what's interesting. I very deliberately, I would normally have told her, but you know, the Nelson Mandela Foundation knew about it. I very deliberately didn't email her to tell her about it, because what I had to do is I had decided that when the book came out, I just wanted to go and you know, send her a copy so that she would be pleasantly surprised, because I put her and Zeni in the book as children, you know. So yeah, so it hit hard.
So
and it's a loss for
she's,
South Africa.
She's never going to read that now.
Yeah, I know. I know. Hopefully her kids will read it.
Mm-hmm. I was reading something earlier on today where someone was quoted as saying that Zinzi Mandela was a struggle activist in her own right. And I think that is so true. We in Nigeria,
no, absolutely.
Even we in Nigeria, back in the days when Mandela was still incarcerated, Zinzi was very, very visible and uncompromising and fearless. May she rest in peace.
Yes, absolutely. A lot of people forget actually that in 1977, when Winnie Mandela was banished to Brantford, she was banished with Zinzi. You know, she went there with this daughter who, you know, in spite of everything that she went through, I think perhaps more than anybody else, Zinzi had the right to be angry that she had her parents taken from her. She was banished. She dealt with so much as a young child. Like, she didn't have a childhood like all of us have had childhood. She didn't have a childhood. She was a child of the struggle. She just couldn't be Uzinzi. So she was Nelson and Winnie's child all the time, and that can take a toll on any child, you know. But somehow she managed to come out of it with grace and with love for her fellow human beings, and that says a lot about her, you know.
She'll be missed. Thank you so much for your reflection, your reflections on the late Zinzi Mandela. May we ask you to perhaps read from your writing about Mandela?
I'm going to read the first chapter. And what I did is I started the first chapter. So I started the book kind of in reverse, where I start with Mandela getting arrested, you know. And I was obviously trying to have fun with the writing, because then I had to go backwards and you know, to lead you back to that arrest. So as you know, when Mandela was you know, undercover, he used the name David Mtamai, which was the name of his client. So here he's in Durban, he's with a white friend of his who's acting like his boss, you know, so that if they get acting like a chauffeur, so that when they get stopped, he's like, no, I'm this guy's driver, you know. The end of David. Are you ready, David? His traveling companion asked. Yes, I am, Mr. Williams, the man called David says. It's their little inside joke where they travel together and are not in safe spaces. Sometimes David even calls him Bas, Afrikaans word that white men expect to hear from black or brown men. A word that means master and shows that they are in charge. They are the boss. Still, Williams is older than David. In the hierarchy of the anti-apartheid movement that they both belong to, however, David would be the boss. But David is black and Cecil is white. In South Africa of 1962, a country where a man is judged by his race, the black man is always expected to serve the white man. David makes sure he carries himself like the respectful chauffeur he's supposed to be. He carries Cecil's briefcase and puts it on the back seat. Will you sit at the back with your briefcase, Mr. Williams, sir? David asks as he opens the back door and doffs his cap. Cecil, a theater director who rather enjoys performing as much as enjoys directing performance, answers, No, old chap, you know what? I think I'll drive today, since you drove on your way here. I have a lot of work for you when you return to Johannesburg, so you will drive enough. David lowers his head, opens the door for Cecil, and when Cecil is seated, he goes round and sits on the front passenger seat. He feels his revolver, a gift from his military trainer in Ethiopia, in its holster inside his jacket. Once they start driving, they both relax. You must be tired, comrade, Cecil says, exhausted. The trip and everything I did had to be done, but I can't wait to sleep for a few days. Then his eyes light up. And of course there's Winnie, my poor wife. Widowed while I'm alive. It will be so good to see her and the children. Cecil grants an agreement but says nothing, leaving David alone with his thoughts. Today, they're driving in the light of day. David prefers it that way. Night brings cover, but there's also the unknown. In their hunt for him, police imagine that he travels only at night, and that is when they set roadblocks. Today, 2 days ago, when he arrived in Bechuanaland, the magistrate told him the South African police were already on the lookout for him. Did someone in the movement let slip that he's coming back? The route from Durban to Joburg is one of the most beautiful parts of the country. The hills and valleys are brown with some sparse greenery. The South African winter has just ended, but in this part of the country, the weather is always warm and welcoming. He wonders if the hills have any caves. He chuckles to himself. He has really started thinking more like a soldier than a politician. What? Cecil asked, taking his eyes from the road for a moment and looking at him. Nothing, he says. He's thinking of his soldiers, well-trained and well-armed, using the caves up these hills as bases. They would be able to do some covert operations in Durban, Pietermaritzburg, and surrounding areas from there without being detected, he thinks. And should someone finally know where they are, assuming they come and investigate without helicopters first, they could hurl some boulders down the hill and cause some damages while escaping. He looks outside again, this time as the man who grew up in the village but has become a city man. He remembers the freedom of the outside. He never tires of the beauty that he sees when he travels this road. And today, he's traveling as tired as he is. And today, as he is traveling, as tired as he is, he's feeling happy even as he worries about the police. He's happy because he managed to brief the leaders of his organization, the African National Congress, on his travel on the continent and beyond. Travels which were fruitful to the movement as they were to him as the commander-in-chief of the armed wing of the movement. Umkhonto weSizwe, spear of the nation. He believes that the training he received while he was away will allow him to truly be the spear that pricks the nation's conscience. Perhaps through their military tactics, the government can begin to see all people as equal, whether black, white, or brown. Through his organization's actions, he hopes that the President of South Africa, Hendrik Verwoerd, and his government can begin to see all people as equal. Not everyone agrees, but the man in the passenger seat believes only an armed revolution will free them from the yoke of the apartheid state. As far as the apartheid government is concerned, South Africa belongs to the Europeans and everyone else is there to serve them in their different degrees. The Asians with less privileges than the Europeans. The coloreds, a mixture of either Asian and African or African and European, who failed to pass for whites, or Africans who succeeded in passing for coloreds, perhaps with their soft curls that a pencil could fall through and lighter complexion, have it better than the Africans. They that the Europeans and sometimes everyone else in this country without African origin believes are at the bottom. Not on his watch. He thinks again with a sense of euphoria. As Commander-in-Chief of Umkhonto weSizwe, he plans to change this. This land is beautiful, he says to his companion who was driving. No wonder they'll do anything to keep it, including invent lies that there was no one when they got here. He's happy too that he met with the Durban command led by Bruno Mtolo. It was the first time he and Bruno met, but he has heard good things about him. There have been one or two complaints about his drinking, but from what he saw of him yesterday, it's nothing to worry about. Bruno has briefed him about the base they've set up in Durban's Kloof neighborhood, a neighborhood meant for Europeans on African soil. Bruno justifies being there by pretending to be a gardener to one of their white comrades. The irony. Perhaps this is what is meant to be servant leaders. The Durban command has been doing well with their acts of sabotage. He laughed with them and complimented them on blowing up a power station that caused darkness for a while in the city of Durban earlier in the year. He's happy too because after briefing both the party and the Durban command, the comrades in Durban hosted a party for him. They called it a welcome home party as he has just arrived back in the country. They also called it a farewell party as he was leaving Durban to return to Johannesburg. He looks in the rearview mirror as he remembers the music and dancing and he gets anxious. Cecil, he says to the man who's driving. Cecil hears the seriousness in his voice, takes his eyes off the road flee again and answers, yes, David. They both laugh a little. The use of this name, David, continues to be a source of amusement to them both. In the safety of the car, they can laugh. You know, this flawless state machinery wants me, he says, warming up to his subject. How many years do you think they would give me if they knew that I'm not just a speaker, but I'm now a guerrilla, military trained. Cecil does a small whistle before answering. You're a lawyer. What do your law books say? A life sentence? He shakes his head and answers, it won't be life. They want me dead. Definitely the death sentence. His anxiety increases. He's a father of 5. If anything were to happen to him, what would happen to his children? He smiles a little nervously, but then remembers that he has nothing to worry about. He has good comrades across the racial groups. They would be loyal to his memory and look after his family. Then he shakes his head. Lately, his feelings of apprehension have almost always become equal to his feelings of joy. Nothing will happen to him. He whispers under his breath to give himself courage. The apartheid police fumble, and for the last 2 years, his greatest strength has been hiding in plain sight. Do you think my little Zinzi will remember me? I've been away for so long, he asks.
Thank you so much. Great.
All right, my friend.
Bye.
Thank you.